Sure, thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks a lot for the briefing. You mentioned WOW, and so I wanted to ask you, I mean, it may have been after your trip, there are reports of a very specific attack by the government or Dinka militia killing 16 civilians on April 10th. And I wanted to know, one, whether or not this came after your trip, what was your sense of the sort of ethnic dimension of the both the conflict and the delivery of aid? And on Somalia or I wanted to know, can you speak specifically about Somaliland? I get a lot of emails from people there saying that there may be a lack of aid in Somalia overall, but there's very much of a lack of UN, at least, assistance in Somaliland. And I wanted to know, what's the ratio of aid that comes in that's at like remittances by the diaspora itself, and how does that compare to what the UN's doing? And then finally, just I would expect, I guess, WFP, given that you're talking about hunger, do you as a panel have any view of, there's a proposal by U.S. Senator Bob Corker to change the way in which food aid is done. And I wanted to know, it seems like UN officials can now speak freely about U.S. proposed changes. Do you have any view of this proposed reform of food aid? Thanks.
Okay. Manuel, do you want to say anything about Somaliland?
I don't have the details about Somaliland. We are in Somaliland. There's been assistance being brought to Somaliland for always. I don't know the exact proportion of the aid that goes to Somaliland versus other parts, but our proportion of aid is based on the needs. It's not based on whether kids are in Somaliland or in Baidoa or in other places in the country. It's based on needs. So this is how we do. But we have presence there. We're working out of Hargeisa in the whole of Somaliland. I've always been. I myself worked in Somaliland and Somalia quite a while, and we were there.
I think perhaps also UNDP strengthening the humanitarian coordination mechanisms of whether the federal government or the state governments in Somaliland, in Puntland, also in Juba, in order to sort of help them better coordinate aid deliveries.
Go ahead.
And it is the same for UNFPA in terms of presence in Somaliland. And in fact, we just concluded jointly with UNICEF a program on maternal health and joint nutrition. And in fact, the government lead on that is actually now the Minister for Humanitarian Affairs in Somalia. So we are present where there is need. That really determines where the focus of our efforts goes and to the extent that we have resources to meet those needs.
Okay, so on the attacks in WOW, we actually went the day after the attack. So our mission was there the morning after the attack. And as you would expect, of course, tensions were quite high within the community after what had happened. But what we were really humbled to see was how proactive and courageous our humanitarian colleagues were. Even though some of them had been caught up in the violence, they had been detained and beaten, they had resumed humanitarian operations straight away. So the day after the attack, they were back in operation. We saw food being distributed. We visited a number of the displacement sites, and again, as you do in these places, you see phenomenal resilience and courage among the population. Always just looking ahead. Obviously, every incident that occurs undermines their confidence and their sense of safety and well-being. But again, a very resolved community to try and hope that again there won't be a further reoccurrence. But unfortunately, since our mission, we have seen a further reoccurrence, and we've had to actually, because of that deterioration, we've had to announce the evacuation of a large number of humanitarians from that area, again because they have been caught up in the violence. They have not been respected by the parties to the conflict. But we are hoping that we can see an early return, because again, our colleagues are willing to give their lives to save lives. But we have a duty of care not to expose them recklessly to danger in those circumstances. And then finally, on your question on remittances, what historically has been the case in Somalia is that the remittances from abroad far outstrip the international effort, for sure. As we understand it, although as humanitarians we don't have all the insights and details on that, it is multiples bigger than our targeted humanitarian assistance to those who don't have the benefit of external support from families and diaspora and so forth. But last time I had a number on that, it was in the region of 1.2 billion US dollars, which compares with our funding of around 500 million. So again, it just puts it into context of how important the diaspora's support is for the population.
One last question.